Hello. So in this video is going to be a performance review of Theatre of War Productions' Antigone in Ferguson, which is basically an adaptation of Sophocles' Antigone, translated and slightly adjusted by Brian Dories. I don't know. He said his name at the beginning of the production, and I'm probably mispronouncing it, so if I am, Brian, I apologize. But it's an adapted version, a staged reading of Sophocles' Antigone with a substantially expanded part for the chorus, which is really, really important in this production. So the origins of Antigone in Ferguson was actually inspired by the anti-police brutality protests following the murder of Michael Brown by police in Ferguson, Missouri in 2014. And a lot of the people who were involved in the creation of Antigone in Ferguson were also part of the protests and have been part of the Black Lives Matter movement in the US. So this is very much an outgrowth of that movement for social justice. The other thing that I think is really, really crucial about Antigone in Ferguson is that it is a distinctly community-rooted production. So a lot of the people who are involved in the show, a lot of the people who perform or sing as part of the chorus are Ferguson residents. Some of them are professional actors and vocalists from New York or LA, but a lot of them are Ferguson residents. And so that's really significant in terms of the ethos of this play. And I'm going to talk about that in this video. So the plotline is the plotline of Antigone, of Sophocles' Antigone. Again, it's essentially a staged reading. So I'm not gonna devote too much time to talking about the plotline because it's an extremely well-known plotline. What Antigone in Ferguson does that's really, really interesting is a massively important role for the chorus. So the chorus sings. So the actual scenes, the bits of dialogue between named characters are condensed, and the choral part is expanded. So the music itself was written by Dr. Phillip Woodmore, and actually on the Zoom performance he was there whenever the chorus was performing. And you could sort of watch him directing or conducting this music. And he brought such a tremendous energy and such tremendous joy to conducting. It was actually really fascinating to watch him conduct. But the music is largely inspired by church music, gospel choirs and things like this, with some obvious influences of like jazz and classical and other musical genres. But a lot of this is music that one might hear in church or a revival meeting or something like this. And so in that way, it's very much rooted in the experience of African American communities, which tend to be, by and large, Christian and tend to have very strong musical traditions in their churches. And so we have that element. And actually some of the songs are very clearly gospel inspired. Like the last song in the performance this evening, because I don't go to church, I'm not religious, I don't know whether this is like a formal hymn or gospel song or something like this, but the last song before they transitioned out of the performance itself was about the blood of the lamb and washing away one's sins and whatever it is, which are very Christian themes, not particularly Greek polytheistic themes, but that's irrelevant to the larger point of the production. So we had that element. But along with that choral part, there's also soloists. And so you have these really dynamic music parts. You have these beautiful choral harmonies, but then you also have these really top-notch vocalists. So the soloists, and if I mispronounce anybody's name, I apologize. With John Leggett, Jeremy Clay, De-Andrea Blaylock, Marcel Davies Lashley, I can't read my own handwriting, and Dwayne Foster. So they each brought a different energy, but they brought a dynamic component to the music. So you had these soloists who were capable of highlighting particular musical through lines or particular lyrics alongside the choral harmonies that provided that bass line, and that sometimes even took center stage in the music. So that was one element that was really significant. You then had the set of individual actors who were performing the spoken roles: Antigone, Creon, Ismene, the guard/messenger, Haemon, and Tiresias. I think that's all of the spoken parts, but I may have missed one out there. But the actors were really good, which is great because if you've never acted, Zoom performance presents a number of challenges, and the performers tonight, the actors tonight, did a really good job overcoming those challenges. Like, normally when you're on stage with someone, you can build a dynamic. You can play off of what they're doing to strengthen and lift your own performance. Zoom doesn't lend itself to that. You also don't have stage space that you can move around. You're just reading to the camera, which is pretty alienating in terms of trying to give a dynamic and a lively performance. But these actors did it really well. So I don't know any of the actors' names because on Zoom they were just listed by their character names. So I apologize for that. But the actor who played Creon, for instance, had this great sort of Mafia Don type presentation, this performance that was menacing and mercurial and felt at any moment like he could go from being very reasonable and trying to be sort of diplomatic to brutal executions. Antigone, she brought to life that character's rage, that character's sort of righteous anger at Creon, at the patriarchy, and even at the citizens of Thebes, who she regards as sort of abandoning her to her fate rather than speaking up for what they believe is right. Tiresias was a really interesting character because he had his inflection. I mean, he had these sort of Stevie Wonder type glasses, these black sunglasses, but his inflection was really interesting because he had that sort of, I characterize it as like revival preacher inflection, where he could create emphasis for important words in his predictions by drawing out the syllables and then abruptly cutting the sound. So that actually worked really well for that character. It gave him a sort of ethos and a gravitas that worked really, really well. And then actually, even though he's a supporting character, I really liked the actor who played the guard/messenger. I can't put my finger on what it was about his performance, but I thought it was really, really good. Especially his speech where he narrates the deaths of Haemon and Antigone, He brought a foreboding to that speech, which is really what it needs. Like, it needs to be full of menace without necessarily sort of giving things away, and that actor did that really, really well. But the other thing that was super important about this production, or that I thought was really significant about this production, is that it was framed in such a way that it played up Theatre of War's commitment to community, commitment to dialogue, commitment to social justice and forward movement and things like this. The production was prefaced with an address by Cori Bush. And I'm going to put a link to her website down in the description below this video. If you don't know who Cori Bush is, she was a Black Lives Matter activist who had been active in Ferguson since Michael Brown's murder. And she just won the Democratic primary for the first House district in Missouri. So if she gets elected, fingers crossed, if you're in Ferguson and St. Louis, vote for her. If she gets elected, she will be an incredible progressive voice and a voice for social justice, for equality, and for compassion in Congress. So good luck, Cori Bush. I really hope you win the election and can represent your community. But the production started out with an address from her talking about the context of the Ferguson protests, Michael Brown's murder, and so on, and how Black Lives Matter has grown over the years. This is a really interesting gesture because in ancient Greece, before plays were put on at the city Dionysia, politicians would give addresses. So Theatre of War, in this sense, has like pulled this ancient tradition and resituated it in the current moment. But then the other framing element was the post-show discussions. So initially they started with a panel of local people, people who had lost loved ones to police violence, and had those people give their reactions. And then they opened the discussion up to audience members, to let audience members ask questions and give reactions and things like this. And so in that sense, it was a great encapsulation of Theatre of War's general ethos of community orientation, social justice, etc., etc., and that ability to have dialogue and to listen empathetically.